Hey guys, so glad to see you all here today for the final day of PyFest online. I am really excited to be here with you. I am Mariah Peterson. And I really hope that wasn't echoing for you. I had like 7 speakers turned on. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll jump right in. Looks like the first couple of talks we have today will be some lightning talks. And the first one is called, Can We Talk About Working Software If It Is Not Usable by Anyone? By Sauro Cesaretti and Stefano Ottaviani. Welcome, guys. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. So, Sauro, I see that you are an accessibility expert. You graduated from the University of Urbino 38 years ago, and you've spent, looks like the last 15 years helping developers with assistive technology, including, and most importantly, the Italian Blind Union of Ancona. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, all right. Totally fine.
Yeah. And Stefano, looks like you're a software developer, and you've been working a lot in the community as well, including they have communities of Dev Marche and the Italian of community managers.
Yeah, exactly.
And you guys work together on an event called Accessibility Days, and that's Italian based, right? Based in Italy?
Yeah, it's an Italian event.
Italian event that the main Italian event that speaks about accessibility and technology.
That is super awesome. I totally think that oftentimes that's one of the things we forget about, right? That there's so many talented, incredible people that might not always work best in the environments that I might work best in. And so there's always a space. And I'm glad that you guys are working so hard in that space to create those opportunities. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to turn the time over to you. If you could just give a quick little intro about why this talk is important, just 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll go ahead and get that talk started.
Okay. Yeah. The main thing about this talk is to let the people know how much is important to speak about accessibility and how much accessibility influence the inclusion of every kind of people. That's the main reason of this talk, and we are really glad to be here with you and to bring this kind of message.
Awesome. I'm excited as well. Okay, let's go ahead and jump.
Okay, so I'll start. I speak mainly to software developers, but actually this topic is for everybody, but create technology. So designer, tester, project manager, everybody. Every day, as software developers, we strive to build solutions to people's problems and needs. We participate in communities and conferences such as this one to improve the quality of the applications that we develop. What we most likely don't know is that part of the population has serious difficulties to use our software due to accessibility issues, or at last has difficulties to use them in autonomy. And autonomy is really an important keyword in this context, as we'll see in a moment. So, two questions arises. Who are these people that cannot use our software, and what can we do as software developers to improve the situation? So, first question, who are these people that cannot use our software? At this point, probably many of you already thought of people with disabilities, and you would be right. But here is the first breakthrough. In some way, any of us in certain situations can have disabilities. And this is something that designers already understood. They even coined the expression design for all. What does this mean? What we usually think of are permanent disabilities. People born or became after an accident or a disease, for example, blind, deaf, without a limbs, and so on. Actually, there are two other kinds of disabilities. The temporary ones, for example, after an accident or surgery, we could be unable to do some activities for a certain period of time. So we are practically disabled. Or the situational disabilities. Imagine a parent that can use the smartphone with only one arm because with the other one, he or she is holding the baby, or a speech that you cannot hear due to the background noises. And finally, what we all have in common, aging. You all know that after 30, 45, we start to have some health issues, especially with sight and hearing. Some people have minor issues, but others have really big problems, and we cannot know what the future will reserve to us. How many of you already activated the Zoom features in the smartphones? If my grandmother didn't use WhatsApp when she was old, it wasn't a problem for her. It didn't exist at her time. Instead, our generation will want and need to use these devices, even as we get older. So all of us can really be a person with disability at some point. And now the second question. What we can do as software developers to improve the situation? Technology can really help the people with disabilities. It allows them to do things otherwise impossible. Thanks to technology, in a certain sense, we can say that a person is no longer disabled with respect to the activity they want to do. We could really make tons of examples. I just tell you this one. Alessandro Bordini, a friend of us, became blind after an accident. This didn't prevent him from traveling the world, visiting more than 100 countries. How did he do that? He did that with only 3 tools. The white cane, a rucksack, and then a phone. Why the phone? Because the phone, since its introduction in 2007, it hasn't changed all the history of smartphones, but also the life of people with some kind of disabilities, such as blindness. The phone is a technological marvel that integrates some extraordinary assistive technologies, such as VoiceOver. Despite, or maybe thanks to, its gorgeous design, it is one of the most accessible technologies, even for blind people. And even if it hasn't a hardware keyboard that gives direct tactile feedback to the blind users. So, in a sense, it's really magic. Or, on the contrary, think about all the times that technologies are not that well developed. If a blind person would come to work to your company, would be able to use software such as your ERP, the CRM, and e-commerce, and so on? Almost naturally, the answer would be no. In this way, we constrain blind people to do the classic works that they used to do, such as telephone operator, like the same situation of a century ago. And this is due only because we don't give them better tools. Okay, up to now, we gave only bad news. Now it's time for some good news. First, accessibility is not necessarily rocket science. We are used to think to complex assistive technologies to help people with disabilities, like the one inside the phone. But we don't need to create assistive technologies. We only need to exploit them. We must do that. Our software must cooperate with these technologies. Accessibility is really in everything we do, even in the small things. It's all a question of awareness. Some examples: color contrast. Who can read the text without problems of the slide? And these are examples taken from real production website. Another example: alternative text for images. We use a lot of images, infographics, images on social networks, so on. A visually impaired person can get the information in the images only if it has an alternative textual description. Another example: PDF that are scanned only to put a signature on them. In Italy, we saw a lot of them, or a lot of this situation during the pandemic. This kind of PDF are practically unreadable by visually impaired people. And the solution is quite easy. Just publish the original PDF. Another example: public speaking can also be made accessible. Font size, color on the slide, subtitles, a lot of small details that can make a big difference for attendees. So at this point, you could wonder, and so what can we do? Since childhood, everybody has admired superheroes. Probably even growing up, we admire them, given the success of movies such as the Marvel ones. Some years ago, there was a slogan by Microsoft that said something like, technologies empower people to achieve more. If you think about it, people with disabilities are the ones that need to be empowered more. Technology can allow them to do things otherwise impossible for them. So, as developers and creators of such technologies, we really have the power to make people do things otherwise impossible. And that is not only a simple power, it's really a superpower. So, in a way, all of us creating accessible technologies can become a superhero, and a real one, not a fantasy one.
Okay, I will go ahead. Me as a blind birth guy, I will try to bring my experience of what is accessibility and what it makes difference. Because in everyday life, I experience and deal with accessibility issues. And I will try to give you some example of what is really examples that makes life sometimes critical. The first one is an example of the Italian government platform that has been created for dedicated for registering for vaccination. Every region made its own version of this kind of platform to handle the registration of disabled people for vaccination against COVID-19. The problem is that most of them at the beginning were not really accessible. It doesn't mean that they have not a very good user experience. It really means that they create a digital barrier to register and to do it autonomously. And for a blind, it is really frustrating having a situation like this. Another example that can be really avoided is when, for example, we have to organize a conference and we have to choose which platform to use. it is really vital to consider a platform that really focus on accessibility feature. During the Accessibility Days 2020, the first online edition, we argued a lot for which platform to use, because we have been judged since Zoom that we choose for accessibility feature has problem of security at the beginning. But it is really important for our point of view to consider accessibility, because it will exclude, as Stefano said, a lot of people that we cannot imagine. The last example that I would like to give for my experience is the WhatsApp versus Telegram that we are having in this period, because privacy issues and these kind of things are really important. But if you consider that Telegram has still very several issues in accessibility, it will be important first to consider, in my point of view, to use a tool that is accessible, because privacy is really, really important, and everybody cares of how these tools handle our data. But if a software cannot be used for several people, it is something really dramatic in my point of view. Okay, just some, as a developer as well, I have a developing background skills. I would like to give some basic suggestions how to implement accessibility. As Stefano said, it's not something like really big to build accessible software. The Web Content Accessibility Guideline from W3C is the best point where to start. Those guidelines are basically defined for web applications, but they are the starting point for every kind of application, even if we are developing web application, mobile application, and desktop application. The key points are all the same. Labeling correctly objects, giving descriptions of graphics, providing a well-structured document and interfaces that can be easily navigated using assistive technologies. And the most important thing that I would like really to suggest to all developers is really to test your products using assistive technologies. There are already on every device onboard assistive technologies that you can just turn on and try it out with your application. And you will really have an experience of what a disabled can experience when use your software. So that's the message that I would like to give. Try, experiment, and you will really build something that will change totally life of people. Thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I believe in Italian you would say molto buono, right? For very good.
That's right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you. Right.
So I just have a couple of questions for you guys before we go. First for Stefano. The title of your talk is Working Software Not Usable If It's Not Usable by Anyone. What do you mean by the software is not usable by anyone?
Yeah, as we said, this is really an issue that does involve only people with disabilities, but really everybody. So it's the same topic, but designer already coined the term design for all. Maybe at some point we should have also a dev for all, because it's really something for everybody. There is in Italy there is an expert called Roberto Scano, an expert on these topics. It says we must not create something that is accessible. We must create something that is well done, well built, and it's a consequence that is accessible. Accessibility is only a consequence of things that are well done.
I like that. I like that idea of when we in development, often we talk about well-crafted software, well-made software, or responsible coding. And it's nice to think about accessibility just being part of the baseline of something that is standard and well-made.
Yeah, it should be a tool on our belt.
Exactly. And for you, Sauro, in your experience, how accessible is the software landscape today? Do we have a long way to go, or are we kind of getting there?
Well, let's say the people started to talk about accessibility, and it is really a significant thing that is making difference at the moment. There is still a lot to do. I think there is still a lot to do. There is still a lot mainly to bring accessibility, to build with accessibility in mind. But I would like to think positively, since we are talking about these topics these days with in this event, in accessibility days, in global accessibility awareness day, all over the world there are events that are talking about accessibility. So people are becoming aware. They are creating a kind of skills with all these technical documentation that W3C created, but not only them. And so I would like really to think that in the near future we will have good result, and we can do really more with technology, more than now.
100%. I agree. I think technology is the tool for the future and tools for everybody. Thank you guys so much for that talk today. That was really awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to you, and it has been a really big pleasure for us to be part of this event.
Awesome. So our next talk will be by Aisha Bello. And we're going to be talking about the state of the Python community in Africa, which looks a very interesting topic. Hi, Aisha, welcome. You're doing good. Am I the only one that can't hear her, or is this there we go.
Wait.
There we go.
I'm good now.
We got you. We've got sound now. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one that runs into technical difficulties on these live events.
Yeah, always the unmute button. Always the mute button.
Yeah. So, Aisha, I have here a little bio of you. It says that you work as a solutions architect for AWS based out of Toronto, Canada. That's way closer to my neck of the woods. I'm out here in Utah in the United States. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, we're in this hemisphere, but we're super glad to be part of the PyFest in Italy. It says that you co-founded and were a former board member of the Python Nigeria community and a as well as a board member of you're a fellow for the Python Software Foundation, a Django Girls board member, Django Software Foundation member, and a winner of the 2016 Malcolm Tredenick Memorial Award. That's impressive. That's an impressive resume. You work on mentoring African women through PyLadies and Django Girls, and bringing communities together through PyCon conferences, both PyCon Nigeria and PyCon Africa. And in addition to all of that, you have a podcast.
Yeah, I do. It started during the pandemic, but yeah.
Oh my goodness, I thought I did everything. You've put me to shame with all the stuff you're doing here. That is awesome. We're so excited to hear about. And it says you enjoy painting as well in your free time to keep your sanity.
Yeah, in a pandemic world, when you can get out to do stuff, it's it's like I tried painting, but amateur stuff, nothing spectacular.
That's awesome. Well, we're really excited to have you here and to chat with you a little bit. So from my understanding, this is going to take a little bit of an interview format, and I have a list of questions for you, so we can go ahead and just jump in and get that rolling. So, okay. How did the Python Nigeria community start?
That's a very interesting question, because I feel like many people would have like different variations of the story. But I mean, from my point of view, I had attended EuroPython. I think it was EuroPython 2015 in Bilbao, through Django Girls Bilbao at that time. So I was in the UK then. I was doing my master's. And then, I was like, I knew I wanted to learn more. I knew I wanted to do more. So I was just on Google that day searching, like, opportunities for women to learn coding and things like that. And then some on Django Girls, EuroPython, and then that opened up a whole world. And then I was in that space of like that 1 week conference, because when you attend Django Girls, you get to be part of the conference as well. And I just was like, why don't we have any of this back home? Like, what's going on? Like, this is such an amazing community. Like, surely there should be someone doing Python in Nigeria. Like, I mean, I know I was taught like Java and C++ in university then, but I'm like, I mean, somebody must know about Python somewhere in Nigeria. Like, so what's going on? And then I went online and looked at, Python communities in Nigeria, and I stumbled on this thread that said that a bunch of people talked about it, but many people talk, nobody does anything about it. And then I remember just reaching out directly to the people on the thread, and then I, started talking to like it was Chukudi in this instance, and then we just like, what, let's put something together. Let's have an event. So I'm big on Django Girls, and so I was like, I was going to do Django Girls Lagos, like the first in Nigeria, and then we used that opportunity to
No, you're good. It just flipped for a minute.
Okay. So I used that opportunity to like, use Django Girls to start the Python Nigeria community. And I would say it's been great ever since. Let me try to disconnect my VPN. Is it better now?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I would say that's how the community came about. Like, I would say it fully came about in 2016. We had our first conference, our first PyCon. It was 2017 or 2018. Developed the Python community, and yeah, that's how I would say we started.
Awesome. And so since getting involved with this community and started working with Python in Nigeria, have you seen new opportunities start to arise in that area, as well as after you talk about the new opportunities, what challenges still persist that you guys are working on as a community?
So I would say like there were lots of opportunities to like get more people involved. And I mean, especially coming from a place where the culture around like not just the men, like, you know, I'm taking the Jungle Girls play here. The culture around, you know, software or, you know, corporate jobs, usually if it was not marketing or businesses, small businesses like, you know, catering, you know, fell more to like, oh no, that's just mostly the guy thing. And yes, it is a male dominated industry. So the opportunity to bring more women into technology, getting them started in a way that opened up the world of what was possible in tech, right? So, you know, I have like a lot of women who attended the Jungle Girls workshop and ended up being technical product managers, right? Ended up going into software testing, ended up being developers as well, even if it's only a different stack. But just giving people the opportunity to see what they could become that is not like constrained to what society has constantly taught them that they could and should be, you know, was like, I think, one of the biggest opportunities that we have. And, you know, nothing brings me greater joy than to get that message of, I'd like to just see like a post on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and see somebody who's, you know, woman starting our own startup, like our own tech startup, and saying, you know what, I started out with a Jungle Girls workshop, you know, and I'm like, whoa. And even even on the other side of that divide, right? When we look at education, most times like the education curriculum, like lagged, like, you know, lagged backwards. Like people are still learning Pascal and Fortran in university, computer science, like school, and then it's like, okay, how do we the opportunities to actually make Python part of education, where more people are encouraged to learn programming and just do more programming in a language that is user friendly and easier to learn, right? So there are opportunities there. You know, I could go on and on. Um, but I would say like one of the main challenges that we face now is, well, I mean, apart from the challenges, it's not so much the technology as it is the society, right? So if you look at things like some insecurity that happens, the fact that some social issues like, you know, constant electricity, you know, that we take for granted in other parts of the world, and just the general ideas around that, and making sure that this community that is volunteer run, people are not bogged down with everything that's going on in their lives and in the society, whether that is the insecurity, the kidnapping, or whether that is power, or whether that is the economic issues, and just, you know, making the community more sustainable. I think that's the major challenge. So continuity, sustainability, and, you know, just like I don't even know how to add to that, but yeah.
Okay, no, I get it. It's not easy. It's when you find yourself given opportunities, you always want to be able to share them with everybody else. Show them that they too can achieve a lot of success. No, I totally get that. And kind of building off of that, what can the international community do to help grow other emerging communities, like communities in Africa or other areas of the world that some of these struggles that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so I would say especially like, I feel like Africa is like so diverse. I feel like that disconnected is that okay, I'm back. So I feel like the continent is so diverse. So some challenges we face in Nigeria is kind of completely different from challenges that Namibians face, different from what the Python South African like community face in terms of like challenges, right? So I would say, well, like one of the things that international community has been great so far, because I feel like the African community would not be where it is now if it wasn't for the input of, you know, many folks in the international space, whether that's the Python Software Foundation funding us, supporting us, you know, making sure our events like happen, or whether that is people volunteering their time, right? So I feel like one of the ways, I don't think there's anything more than you could give to anyone else of greater value than your time. So whether that is, helping out a local event, volunteering to mentor or volunteering to be part of the conference organization or just giving a talk, right? Or being an MC, being in that space, learning more about its people, I just being able, it's a very different experience. It's very peculiar. And I'll say this because I learned about the private community, in Europe, right? I've been to a couple of conferences and seen some of the things the communities in the States and North America do. It's a very, very different and interesting environment. I remember going to PyCon Canada, was it like 2019? And I said, go to a conference where you are the minority. Where everyone's so if I'm at the conference, like, oh, I know I'm the minority, but it's like, why would you go to a conference where you're part of where you are the minority, and then you see a lot of people who don't look like you, and then learn from them, learn the challenges, learn how they're using Python to solve their like local homegrown challenges.
Well, for sure. I totally agree with that. I think one thing that COVID has taught us is that it's a lot easier to connect with people of other communities digitally. And that's something that we can create good experiences with doing, right? And we can give our time to these communities outside of our local community or even our national community and try and help grow the international community so that everybody has those same experiences. I totally get it. I love everything you've said so far. You keep resonating with me so much. It's just so awesome. So how currently you're in Canada. How does living in Canada or living in a large city in Canada, right? Toronto has a huge tech company, has a lot of developers, I'm sure has a great Python community. How has that enabled you to take things back to that African community or give people with less opportunities an ability to change and make themselves better?
I think that I feel like, just some fun facts, right? Yeah. I helped plan the first PyCon Nigeria. I was in Czech Republic at that time, and a majority of the conference planning happened when I wasn't even in country. I've helped out with like PyCon Africa remotely, both PyCon Africas remotely. And then because you'll find that there are particular problems where you want to set up like an event and set up like the ticket registration and then discover that Eventbrite doesn't support countries in Africa, right? And then me being here, it means that I can like help facilitate or being like in a country where the payment is supported. Like I can literally help facilitate things like that. And even just like general, like, so I'll give you an example. The time the first PyCon, was it the first and second PyCon Namibia was happening? Actually, this was the first one. I met Danielle, who was actually organizing PyCon Namibia at PyCon UK, where he gave a lightning talk. And then I told him, I'm like, why are you not having a Django Girls at PyCon Namibia? And he's like, we should do it. And that brought about the Django Girls community in Namibia at that time that started with like the conference. So I feel like more than ever, we're in a global space, right? And I feel like there's so much like the international community can bring to their experience and customizing that experience for like the local African communities, which are very different, by the way. Like you will not believe how different those communities are. Let me see. Did I answer the second part of your question?
Yeah, you did. Okay. You did. You actually gave a really good. I loved the experience where you met somebody at a different conference and making that connection and getting to know that person's background enabled you to go start a new community or influence more people in a different area. I have noticed from my life, I've been afforded opportunities to do similar things, right? To go to larger conferences and to meet people who've done amazing things in their careers. And by making those connections and getting to know these people, I can then facilitate things in other places, right? That they might not be able to, or with people who are of different circumstances where they might not be able to go to these conferences and meet these people, but they can still benefit from their time, or we can create opportunities in their local area where they can, start growing. So yeah, that was awesome experience. And I'm glad that you were able to not only just do it locally, but take it to another country. Now that's really impressive. I do a lot of stuff bringing it home to my local area, but that's kind of very inspiring, the idea of creating communities somewhere else where you see the need. I think that's super inspiring. And
and we forget the impact, right? Because the fact when Python Namibia happened, it sort of like influenced communities in Botswana, in like other parts of like Southern Africa, right? And when Python Nigeria happened, Python Ghana community came up. There's the Python Benin Republic community coming up, influencing other communities in Western Africa. Like you would just be surprised how one thing that's supposed to be local like spreads out and inspires other people in other neighboring communities to actually do the same or even more. And if I'm not even saying it, the Python, I mean, it might look like we started in Python Nigeria, started the kickstarted the Python community in Western Africa, but Python Ghana is doing a better job at community than Nigeria is, from that perspective, to be honest. So yeah, it's something to be proud of for sure.
I agree. That's awesome. Super inspiring. So just kind of as we start wrapping this up, I want to just have a couple of questions kind of just to take it a little bit broader. Could you share something about your experience as a mentor or even a podcaster that can be useful to other people that want to start helping emerging communities or want to help in areas of something like community diversity or community growth?
Yeah, I mean, I've organized, I don't know, maybe 3-4 conferences. And each time there's like a call for proposal, right? You get more people who identify as men, like apply to talk. And then you get people who identify as any other, women or any other minority rarely apply. And then I sometimes I look at the application and then I would not even see a single application from a woman developer. And then it means that, we had to know this was an issue and actively go seek them out, because many times, especially when it comes to like, women, for example, they don't always feel like they know anything or they don't feel like the content or what they know is good enough to be shared to a wider audience. The confidence is in there. So seeking them out, because they're actually all around us. Like, so seeking, them out, whether it's women who are beginners, just starting out their journey, wanting support or encouragement, or, in organizing conferences or events, and, you're not getting the response that you need to have like a balanced event, for example, you have to seek them out. Like, you have to reach out and you have to, it's almost like there's a status quo, and to change it, there has to be a lot of intentionality around it, right? So which means, going to spaces where you normally wouldn't go, following the people on Twitter you normally wouldn't follow, right? Seeking out conference organizers from other communities, whether it's Latin America or Asia or in Africa, as aware, and keep abreast of what's going on when they're doing events, like volunteer your services, for example. So I think that like it cuts across board for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I literally am in the process of organizing a conference, and we were going through the call for papers on Tuesday, and they were all men, like 100%. This is even like I'm in a very affluent tech community here in the United States, and it's still the exact same problem. And now I have to go reach out to people. So definitely true. It applies to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And one last question. Do you have just any advice that you would like to give to Pythonistas in Africa, in Latin America, Asia, any company to take that next step, or just in general?
Well, I think in general it would be you can make a difference where you are. And it can be like the simplest things, right? Like organizing some of this. Some people like they look at me, look at my resume. I'm like, all of this took time. It did not happen overnight. And sometimes it's just starting with like the simple idea of I want something like this where I come from. I want my community or my people to experience this greatness that is, well, I think it's the Python community. There's this popular saying, came for the language, stayed for the community. Like I want this experience for my people, right? And it's just you just having like that dream or that vision and implement it in the simplest of ways. It doesn't have to be anything grandiose, right? Like so if I'm talking to like Pythonistas located in Africa, it doesn't have to be anything grandiose to make a change, to create an impact, to help somebody, even if it's just the one person you help, in their journey to getting, to becoming like maybe in tech or becoming a software developer. It's so much of a fulfilling experience than anything else, to be honest. So yeah, I guess that's an advice.
That is. No,
Yeah.
you said great advice. We can all take home, and that's make a difference where you are, right?
Yeah.
Make an impact no matter what size where you're at. Thank you so much, Aisha. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. And we invite everybody, feel free to reach out on Discord, talk to her on Twitter or whatever. And this talk has resonated with me, and I'm sure it's resonated with everybody else. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Eleonora, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today for another interview. So I'm just going to dive into your bio real quick. I'll give you a quick introduction, and then we can jump in and talk about the diversity success story. It says that you were, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're one of the first women to deal with innovation and digital strategies in Italy. You were born in Rome. You then were adopted by London, which I assume means you love London, and you probably live there if you still do.
I do. Yeah, I've been living in London for 8 years. I'm not in London at the minute, but I do live in London. Yes.
Awesome. You graduated in law with a master's in marketing communication at the business school of, what is that?
Basically the equivalent of Financial Times. In Italy, we have this financial magazine that also has a business school.
Okay.
So in that way, it's sort of 24 ore business school.
Ah, gotcha. And you did a postgraduate course in evolution marketing and social media at the IED in Milan.
Correct. Yes, it's the European Institute of Design.
European Institute of Design, where you do important, it says, where you worked with, and during that program, you worked with Hewlett-Packard, Roberto Cavalli, Privalia, Microsoft, Kingston Technology, TP-Link, and Zones Inc.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. You gave... Yeah. So you have founded Mashable Social Media Days, which then became Digital Innovation Days, which is it says one of the most important events in Italy in the field of digital marketing, social media, and innovation.
Yes.
And you were the director of that from 2014 to 2019, and then you had an exit in 2020 for that.
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. I mean, 2019, you were selected along with 90 other global leaders to attend the Singularity University's executive program in Silicon Valley. And a year later, you started writing a book on digital marketing that's due to be published at the end of this year.
Correct.
That's awesome. And currently, you're co-founder and vice president of the Horizon Group Limited, as well as founder and managing director of Women X Impact, as well as doing regular speaking engagements, consultancies, training, everything else you could possibly ever want to do. My goodness. That's awesome. Welcome to PyFest Online, the very last day, also known as the best day. I don't know if last is best of all the game is a common saying here in the United States. So
good.
Yeah. First question we have here. Help us understand. I literally read a list of so many different things that you have done or are currently doing. So right now, what would you say you do for a living or you do for your job?
So today, let's say 60% of my time is spent on Women X Impact. I'm very happy actually that you're calling it in this way, because that was the name that they've given to it. But in Italy, because they don't understand the X, they always say Women for Impact.
Oh, because of the numbers, yeah.
Exactly. But for me, it was Women X Impact. So 60% of my time now is on the event in the community and building around the events. And 40% of my time is on my clients, because basically me and my business partner, we have this Horizon Group company, and we do consultancy, digital marketing, innovation, social media for large corporations, and influencer marketing too. So we've got clients, we have a team, and we also deal with them. So 40% of my time I do that, and 60 I'm on the event in the community.
That's awesome. That's a pretty good split. Probably nice and refreshing. I mean, you can do what you want, right? Next question. When did you realize that this was the path that you wanted to take? As far as working in the community and making a difference in certain things. And then also, when did you decide that you wanted to kind of found your own company and kind of work for yourself? Like, let's talk about the two things, right? When did you decide that you wanted to get involved in the community and make an impact that way? And how did you decide you wanted to found your own marketing company and kind of be an entrepreneur?
Thank you for this question. So when I realized I wanted to build the community, let's say at the same time when I started to work on the event idea, because I've always, as you mentioned before, I've always done events since 2014. And I always thought that the events themselves, if you don't have a community around it, it's just, the days of the event. But it's different if you have a community that you build that over the year works together, a meetup, and, there is networking opportunities and project exchanging, everything that a community that is supporting and open can give to you. And in this way, when you meet at the event that there is like 1,000 people, you actually put a face behind the name, and it's just a great thing. But you've been building that for a year, if you see what I mean. So since the very start of this project, I said I want to build a community around that, community of powerful women that are ambitious, that want to also make an impact and do things and do more. Especially for those who are working like I've done in tech space, finance space, all these spaces, as also coding, that are mainly male dominated. When I decided to become an entrepreneur, actually was at the beginning, it was a little bit by accident, I have to say, because my first project was Mashable Social Media Day. I actually was contacted by Mashable in New York, and they asked me if I wanted to build these social media day in Milan. They were running that in New York already, many other cities, and they just asked me if I wanted to be the one who was, doing it in Italy for the first time. And at the beginning, I was gonna say I'm not sure, because they didn't offer any budget, anything. So I had to do everything on my own, and I had some doubts. Also, I wasn't really an entrepreneur back in time, but then I kind of followed my instinct, my intuition, my passion, my curiosity. I said, why not? I mean, I already have a community. Back in time, I was already working as a freelance in the social media space. I had a blog, so I was already online, and I had relationships, business relationships that I could leverage. And therefore I said, okay, fine, I'm gonna try. But definitely I wouldn't have thought that since that day when I started, it was, a one-day event, a free event of, 150 people. But then after 3 years, it was 1,300 people event. It was the most tweeted event of the year in 2017. Wow. And we had like 3 days event. People were paying, big sponsors and everything. So let's say that it was all about following my intuition, my curiosity. Said I just want to leverage what I built so far and try to do something on my own. On the other side, although I have to say, I always felt I wasn't really happy in my corporate jobs, although I really liked it, because I was, I was 30, I was product marketing manager in Microsoft. That was my most significant experience, amazing experience. I had $1 million budget to play with as a marketeer, which was amazing. I was still feeling, it wasn't really my path, as you mentioned, because I was creative. I wanted to do things my way. And when you work, with large corporation, you can't do things on your way. And therefore I said, okay, maybe this is not my, my path. But then when that thing happened with Mashable, I said, maybe it's my time to try to, go and try to do something on my own.
And look at you now. You've got your own company. You've got the horizon, like you just kept growing from there. So you've actually answered a couple of my extra questions in one. So, but just a little follow up here. How was your experience working for the big tech company? You kind of mentioned that you wasn't, it wasn't quite where you saw yourself, in the future. But you did give, I assume it gave you great experience with tech companies and kind of that environment. So I guess the question would be, in working with in a big tech company, did you find that gave you good experience to then jump off? Is that something you'd recommend for other people? Or would you recommend, if somebody has an idea, like just jumping off and following their own entrepreneurial dream?
I would say it's great to work for those companies, but maybe when you are, a junior and you want to go from your junior level to mid-senior level. So 3, 4, 5, I think is good, because it gives you the structure that then you need when you're going to build your own company. It gives you the discipline which you need, the tech, the knowledge, I would say, also of your field that you definitely need, because in these companies, you always have mentors, you have managers that, help you to grow. So all those skills, then you need them. You learn also how to, speak in front of a lot of people, especially if you are a marketeer, all those skills, public speaking are all important. So I would say at the beginning of the career, 3 to 4 years is great. But then if you really want to make an impact and you really feel happy doing something that, creating things that are not existing, then you definitely need to quit and start your own thing. I always suggest, let's say, not do it like just quit, but figure out what you like, start doing both things at once. For at least 3 years I've been doing both, been having my own. Obviously, also I was living in London, which is extremely expensive, so I had to do my full-time job, and then at night and the weekends I sacrificed for 3 years, and I built something. So you need to be willing to sacrifice, but at the same time, do your step at the right time.
Exactly. I totally get that. We call them side hustles out here. The idea that you have the extra job on the side, and it really makes you happy, but it doesn't always pay the bills. Let's I want to know, what is Women X Impact, and how did that idea come about?
Right. So it came about because when I exited my previous company, because I built the company on my own and I ran the company myself only, was the only one CEO, only one shareholder for 7 years. Then I had the wrong, unfortunately, idea to get some shareholders in that weren't the right people. And therefore, I decided to just exit, which is still a success if someone, buys your company and, goes away with it happy. But at the same time, I was in a situation where I wasn't really happy at the beginning, to just step out. And I think my experience has taught me that certain skills that we as women still don't have, unfortunately, has had an impact with this situation. And therefore, I wanted to turn, let's say, a negative thing into a positive thing and say, okay, I think we women entrepreneurs are still few, especially in Italy. We need to learn a lot of things. We need to be empowered. And in this way, I built Women X Impact, because also I thought about what I learned at Singularity, exponential, the idea of a women exponential. And I created also this strap line, which is empowering women worldwide, because I wanted to feel like I was giving something to the women community around the world. And yes, and then I said, I think it's needed that people need role models. It's needed that people share experience and can inspire other people. Many women during my career were writing me asking questions, because they didn't really have a mentor. In Italy, we don't really have mentors at university, for example. Even when you go and work, then obviously if you work for Microsoft, you have it. But a lot of people in Italy work for small, medium businesses and they don't have that. And then I said, okay, let's do something where I bring women from all around the world. They can share their experience and inspire new generation, but also existing generation of women that maybe feel, not happy, frustrated, and they need, some tips about how to deal with certain situations and grow and don't feel that glass ceiling that seems sometimes stops women to go above and beyond certain limits. And then I started to build the event. I have to say I was also lucky, because for what was my experience, it took 2 months for me to launch the event, to have great speakers in, because I had relationships. So again, whatever you do in life, you put it together, is always worth using it.
Exactly. I agree. You mentioned the idea of shattering the glass ceiling, or the that theoretical ceiling that's kind of stopping women or other people who are underrepresented from excelling beyond a certain point. And we're kind of you're trying to empower them to be able to break that and move beyond. So, based on your own experiences or from what you've heard from other people, Why are there still few women in leadership positions, and what can we focus on to improve that situation and enable more women?
I think there are several reasons for this. So first of all, because there are not enough, I mean, every country is different, but I would say in Europe especially, there are not enough laws that are actually supporting a gender equality. Still, at the moment there is a lot going on. People are talking about it. It's becoming more and more important. But since, now, I would say so far we didn't really have a very much support on this. There's always been an unconscious bias. I would say even in managers, you find that for certain positions, it seems like for men it's really easier to get there. There are still questions asked to women that are not asked to men at the interviews, like, are you gonna have a family, or what's your plan for, and you wouldn't ask this to a guy. So this means there is, let's say, a social environment that needs to be changed. So this is the first question, the first reason. Second reason, I think, is because it's our responsibility as women. Don't stop each other from ourselves, and don't stop other women to grow, because there is still also the element of sisterhood that needs to be developed. Not all the women are supporting the women, if you see what I mean. There is still sometimes jealousy, not enough support, whether in men you find that. And also we are not that confident as we should be. Not everyone, you can't generalize, everyone is different, but I still see a lot of women not confident enough to say, yes, I'm worth it, I can do it, I can make it. Whether in men, I can see men being more assertive, they negotiate better their salary. So I think there is quite a lot of training that we need to do. And also companies need to do, as I'm seeing now, a lot of internal communities. For example, there is women at Google, women at LinkedIn, women at Facebook. The big corporations are starting to have this internal community to get women to get together, to support each other, to develop some skills, to do events internally, like this event where, they get people from outside coming in, interviewing, sharing role models. And I think this is really good. This is a big step. And I think we need to go ahead with it and keep doing. More and more companies need to do that, not only the big ones.
I agree. My company, we're smaller, and we just started a people resource group for women, just like that. And I think as we start taking these big companies examples, when starting applying them, we'll see more women start to get resources and reach out. Thank you so much, Eleonora. We encourage everybody, if you have questions for her, want to contact her, feel free to go ahead and put it in Discord. Everybody should check out Women X Impact to see how they can make a difference. Thank you so much for joining us today at PyFest. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and thanks for this event. It's amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. And last but not least, we have Pablo Galindo Salgado. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Oh my! So you work on the Python infrastructure team at the software infrastructure department at Bloomberg LP. Is that? In addition to that, you are a C Python core developer and a theoretical physicist that specializes in general relativity and black hole physics.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I studied physics in college. I'm a physicist by training, a software developer by career. So I get it. You gotta.
Yeah, the same here. I think it's a very popular choice.
Right. It seems to be the way to make the money anymore. You're also serving on the Python Sterling Council, and you're the release manager for Python 10 and 11.
Right.
And you have a cat.
Yeah. But
doesn't code. You got to train him to code, but you
Right.
know, you got a cat to keep you company on those long nights trying to get that release ready.
when he's not sleeping, for sure.
Yeah. So, well, I'm gonna turn the time over to you. But just before I do, are you excited for what's to come in Python 3.10?
Yeah, I mean, of course, what I'm going to say. No, it's the most boring release.
No.
Yeah, I am. We in the core team, we worked quite hard to, make a lot of improvements in many areas, and we have some big changes. We are quite excited to see what people think. Hopefully good things. We'll see.
Okay, awesome. Well, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. So I should have a share. Oh, fantastic. So this is going to be like mainly live coding. I'm going to show you basically like newest features of Python 3.10. I plan also to show like some of the kind of behind the scenes, so a bit also maybe some interesting details, or like how these things are developed. We'll see. It depends on the time we have. But yeah, let's go. So what I have here is a compiled version of Python 3.10. So this is not obviously the final version, because Python 3.10 actually will be released on October, on the fall. By the way, we have here the third beta. So you can actually download this thing already, and you can try the things. I'm doing this thing right now, but make sure that you don't try this thing on production for sure, because it's not finished software, unless you are quite brave, right? On the other hand, if you're a library developer, you may be very interested in actually trying these things out to see if you want to support them, or if your library works with Python 3.10. Okay, so let me cover some interesting things. So one thing that I am very excited about. So let's say let's create some Python file here. So let's say we have some context manager, right? And I'm going to write some stupid class here. It's not super important, but let's play with it. So we write some like some enter, and then maybe some exit for the context manager. Cool. And we don't care what this receives, so we are not going to actually use it. So, okay, so imagine that we have this our code here, and now we have since Python 3, you can have a bunch of these, right? So you can say, okay, so I have one of these as y, and then you can say another one of these as let's call this x. Another one as y, and maybe the third one as z, right? So this works, and it's fine. The problem is that as you can see, if you start adding many of these things, the line becomes really, really big, right? So it's not quite good, because maybe the moment you want to add the fourth one, it's going to reach 80 characters super soon, so your linter is going to be like angry with that. So the question is like, okay, so what did you do to make this thing a bit more readable, so it's not like super big? Also take into account that my class is called context, but some classes are bigger, so this may be worse. So unfortunately, the only option that you have to break this thing is use the line continuation character. So it will look something like this. So you go here, and then you add one of these like backlashes thingies. But as you can see already, my beam got confused, because it doesn't know that I want them to be aligned, because it doesn't recognize the syntactic structure of this. So you need to do like something weird like this, right? And this is quite bad, because not only like it looks very ugly, but also Python still counts it as a one line. So it has some consequences of that. For instance, when reporting errors, but also it's very unmaintainable very quickly. And what is more important, your automatic formatters won't work on that. But if you kind of execute this thing with, let's say, let's use Python 3.8 just to see what works. So if you execute this thing with Python 3.8, it works, it doesn't complain. So what you probably want to do here is to say, okay, I'm going to just add this parenthesis, because I see this thing on the imports, right? I see that I can do this thing with imports. So you probably want to say like, oh, I could maybe do this thing, maybe have like, I don't know, some this icon indent, and then add this column here, and then I write my loop over here, right? You could be like not happy about the sad face indentation here, maybe put it in the same line, but this is much better, because like it has like maybe you can place it on the first line here and line them there. All right, so this looks much better, because it's the same as the imports. Like when you have long imports, you can do this thing with parentheses, and now your formatter will be happy, and now Beam recognizes that this is kind of a double, right? But if you try to run this thing with Python 3.8, you will find that actually it doesn't work at all. And the thing that you will see here is that it says, oh, invalid syntax. This is because it's kind of a long story, but it's basically that the old parser that we used to have in Python 3.8, the parser is basically reads this code that I just written and execute this as Python. So the problem is that it doesn't understand really this thing, and there is a very technical reason behind it. I can, maybe someone is interested, I can go into detail afterwards, but it doesn't work. So in Python 3.10, and you will see that also in Python 3.9, but officially only in Python 3.10, you can run hopefully this file, and voila, it doesn't complain because it works. So you can print here maybe instead of patch, just to have something a bit more descriptive, let's print these 3 variables. So in Python 3.10, you can actually write these 3 things, right? And this is much better because you can even have like, like maybe you want a trailing comma just in case, or if you really like to have like clean diffs when you are making code. So, you change one line, it doesn't affect the others, it doesn't need to. You can use the subface indentation, and you can have them super clear, every one of them in its own line, and you can execute it, no problem. So you can see also that if I try this thing on Python 9, which is the latest official version release, this also works. This is because Python 9 is using the same parser technology as the Python 3.10 is used, but we made it official in Python 3.10. So even if you can do it in Python 3.9, it's technically not our official release, just because we needed to give some time to people to, like people that have parsers and other things to catch up. But now it's official. Now it's part of the syntax, so you can safely use it. And I'm quite excited about this one, because even if it seems like a super small change here, is quite a big one, because it makes code quite better. And hopefully in the future, once formatters are able to understand also the syntax, they will format this thing in some shape that is more readable than the whole ugly line that you just saw. Cool. So this is one of the changes. Let's see more changes that we have. So let's go back to Python 3.10. So one of the most exciting things that I am regarding Python 3.10 is that it's some work that I started this release, which improves error messages all around the interpreter. So we saw that it's quite important for users to know what happens when there is something that doesn't work. And sometimes what we have seen is that Python is quite bad at this. Like, let me give you an example. So I'm in the CPython repo right now, but let's open some file here. One of these, like this test.decomps.py, right? So I have like a test with a bunch of things. Like here, this big dictionary, right? This expected dictionary. So one thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to reach to the end of the line, and I'm going to remove that particular bracket. So this dictionary doesn't close anymore. It's like, obviously this is wrong right now, like this code is not correct, but let's see what happens. So look, I'm going to try this thing with Python 3.9, and let's see what happens, right? So test decomps. Let's see what Python 3.9 thinks about my code. So Python 3.9 says, okay, the code is incorrect, but look at this. So it says syntax error, invalid syntax. But look at what it's showing to you. It's saying that this other line is incorrect. It says like, yeah, syntax error here. And then you say, well, what's going on? This line is super correct. Like, look, actually you can copy this line, open Python, paste the line, and the line works. How is the line incorrect? So it turns out that what's happening here is that when I remove this bracket over here from the file, Python keeps parsing, and then it sees this actual equals and says like, yeah, that's not part of the dictionary. It never saw the end of the dictionary because I removed the bracket. But that is quite bad, because this literally can report you the error like in an arbitrary point of the file. So you will be super confused. And this is one of the errors that confuses more people. But luckily now, if we repeat the same test with Python 3.10, so we do the same thing, Python now will tell you, okay, actually the error is that this particular bracket that is open on this line 28, it was never closed. So this not only points you about what the problem actually is, but also it shows you the actual line instead of the weird one, which I think is fantastic. This is actually more complex than it looks like. Not conceptually, is quite not easy, but it's straightforward to implement at least. The problem is that we need to deal with a lot of changes on the tokenizer and the parser to make this impossible, just because the line when this happens is after the line when Python notices the problem, which is when it doesn't see the bracket close. But now you can do it in Python 3.10, which is quite cool. There is also the same thing happens with strings. So for instance, if you have like let's remove this thing. So you have some big string For instance, this one you say, this is some big string. And let's say you don't close the quotes because, I don't know, you forget. So now if you execute this thing with Python 3.10, it will tell you, there is an unterminated triple quoted string literal, which is, you never close these quotes, while Python 3.9 will have told you end of the file while scanning triple quote literal string, but it doesn't tell you where. It tells you like line 8, like which is the end of the file. So it's like good luck finding where the problem is in a big file, right? This was contributed by another core developer called Batuhan, one of our newest core developers. So cheers if you are looking the stream. But this is awesome. I think I'm quite excited about these two particular ones. But then we have much more. So for instance, one of the things I really like is that in Python 3.9, when you do some error, for instance, let's say you are calling a function with a bunch of parameters, and then you use a generator here. So you do something or something in pledge, and then more parameters. So Python is quite smart in this case. It tells you like, the problem is that the generator expression must be parenthesized. This means that Python is asking you to place parentheses here around this thing, right? This is the error, but there is a lot of text here, and it's quite difficult to understand. And Python is kind of pointing to this word here. So you need a bit of experience with the language to know that this is a generator expression, and Python is referring to all of this. It's not referring to only like the word something, right? Also, not super clear for people that have like problems with like vision and things like that. So the cool thing is that in Python 3.10, these errors, the error is the same. So if let's copy this text over here. So the error is the same, but look, if you do the same thing, you will find that now the tokenizer is smart enough to know the whole expression, and it will tell you, okay, so what's going on is all of this expression now is the bad one. And this happens everywhere. Like for instance, as you will see later, now the tokenizer is not pointing in a single place. It's going to point you to many of them, which is quite exciting because I have like, since we released this thing and we commented that we are going to do this thing, many people that have like, some vision problems and they don't see things around very well, they say like, wow, man, this is like super great because now I see much better like where the error is supposed to be, and I don't need to pay attention where this little character is when it's only a single character. But also for, newcomers and people learning the language, it literally tells you like the region of the code that is wrong instead of like just pointing to a letter on some word where they may not know what it means, right? So we're quite excited about this change as well. But we have much more things, so even if are a smaller one. Like for instance, if you do like if X, but you forget to put the colon, now Python will tell you, I expect like a colon here. For instance, this bites me a lot, the one that I'm going to show you right now. So for instance, you have a comprehension and then you do, okay, so XY for XY in zip, iter1, iter2. So this is a comprehension, which is like, it's using zip. So this returns tuples. And then you say, okay, so I don't know, you want to have XY, and then you are unpacking the tuples. So this is a syntax error. But now Python tells you what is the problem. It tells you that the comprehension target, this XY, needs to be parenthesized. So the actual correct syntax is having parentheses here. Right now, if I present it, obviously it's going to fail because iter1 and iter2 are not defined. But as you can see, it's not a syntax error anymore. While, if I just copy this thing over, so in Python 2, this will have look like this. It will tell you, invalid syntax, and it will point to 4, which is, not great. It's quite confusing. So that's another one that we have, and we have kind of plenty of them. Like for instance, if you like, I'm not going to show all of them because that will be a bit boring. But for instance, if you have like some list, and then maybe you forget a comma in the list, now Python will tell you, this doesn't look right. Maybe you're forgetting a comma here. We have like errors. We have plenty of them. Like for instance, if you do tries and then you forget about the except, it will tell you that Python was accepting finally or an except block there. We have, for instance, this is super common if you do like x equal y, and the problem here is that you wanted to say equals, like if these two things are equal, but you forget one of the equal. This is super common, and now Python will tell you, actually this looks wrong. Maybe actually you meant to use double equals or the walrus, right, instead of the equal. I mean, maybe not, maybe it's something else, but like it will show you all these nice things, which I think is just like much better experience, because syntax errors normally happen when you thought that something that you wrote was correct, or maybe you forgot some detail that you are not seeing, obviously, because you forgot it on the first place. And now, like the interpreter is kind of helping you, saying like, okay, actually, hey, look, you kind of mess this up here, and that's good, right? We have plenty of others. Like, for instance, we have this, if you have a function and then you incorrectly indent, so for instance, you do an if loop, but you don't do anything, and then you continue your code, now Python will tell you indentation error. That is not new, but it will tell you now that the expected indented block was after the if statement. So you can immediately go and say, oh, actually it's talking about this thing, not about something different. So that's quite cool. But now let me show you some of the most exciting ones. This is particularly one of the ones that I like a lot. This is the ones that I just saw are about syntax error, like programs that are not correct. But let's talk about programs that are correct, but something is wrong. So for instance, let's say you're importing collections, and then you say, oh, I like collections. It's a super cool module. There is a lot of cool things, and there is this thing called name tuple. So let me get it. So you say, okay, so collections, but now it's like, okay, so it was name tuple like this, or it was like name tuple with like underneath. So once you do this thing, and you try to execute it, this class is incorrect. But now Python will tell you, okay, so module collections doesn't have attribute name tuple, but now Python will offer you a suggestion. Actually, maybe you mean name tuple, like all like with underscore letters, right? Sorry, with a lowercase letter. I don't know what I'm saying. So lowercase letters. So now this is the correct ones, and this works for anything. Like for instance, if you have your own class, and then you have like your foo variable and your var variable, and then you try to access foo, it will tell you actually your custom class doesn't have attribute foo, and maybe you actually mean foo, right? So this is quite cool because when you're trying things out in Jupyter Notebook, or maybe you're trying things out in the interpreter, or maybe, I don't know, sometimes you access some very weird places. For instance, this happens to me very commonly. I have a function, and then I'm inspecting something weird about the function. Maybe it's called object, and I remember that one of these was like f_locals. But now Python will tell me, actually, you mean co_and locals, which is the thing that I was searching for. And I don't need to go at the documentation and, or maybe run dir to know what's going on. It will tell me exactly what I wanted to know, which is quite cool. This also triggers not only on attribute access, because all these examples were about, when you access some attribute and whatnot. This also actually triggers with anything in your local scope. So for name errors, like for instance, if you try flute, it will tell you there is no flute, but there is float. So it will work for globals and locals. The same thing, you have a function foo, and then you have like Pablo equal 1, and then you say print Pablo. And then it will tell you, like, when you go here, it will tell you there is no Pablo, but there is Pablo. So you kind of like, it's smart enough to know about local variables and like global scope, and it will correct it in the correct place, which I think is quite cool. I'm quite excited about like these small improvements. Hopefully you all are, because everyone makes mistakes, and this is a more pleasant way of making mistakes before. Awesome. So let's go to some of the bigger things that we have. So this is quite exciting. This is probably the biggest change, the one that I'm going to show right now on Python 3.10, which is pattern matching. So pattern matching, some people explain it as a switch statement, which I think is not the best way to describe pattern matching, because you think about like switch statements in C are only about integers, and you probably don't want to like have, because you have this kind of big change of like things. So if x bigger than 1, then you do something, and then if x equal 2, maybe well, maybe -2, then you do something else, and you have this kind of big elif change. And then you want to do a bunch of things. In this case, it works because I'm matching against an integer. But if you have more complex cases here, then it will not. A switch statement will not cut it. All right. So what we have here now, I will show you, is the match statement, which is a completely new thing. It feels a bit weird at the beginning, and it still have some weird edge cases. But let me show you what you can do with it. So. Let me show you first what it does. So imagine that you have the base case, right? So imagine you have like a list with a bunch of things. And then, so the way you will use it is that you write the match. We will go into what this is now. Is technically a soft keyword, so you can still do match equal to, and there is no problem. Like Python is not going to disallow you to write match equals to, but you can write match X. So this is starting a match statement, matching on X. And then you say, okay, there is the case when I have, for instance, a list of 3 variables, right? So you write X, Y, Z, and then you say, for instance, a list of 3 bars, and then you say X. Only let's print only Y. Why not? And then you say, okay, maybe I have another case when I have a list of 2 variables, and then you say print something. I don't know, not super important. Or maybe I don't know. This could be also an empty list. So you print empty. So Python will, this is just one case, but Python will bring here a list of 3 variables because it's matching us all these cases, and it's saying, okay, so this list of 3 things actually matches this particular one because there are 3 variables on the list, and it will go into this block. You can do whatever here, but also you have access to the individual variables here, which is quite cool. You can do plenty of, like, this is just a very simple one. You can do super advanced things here. Like, for instance, you can say, okay, instead of matching against a list of 3 variables, you can say, I don't know, maybe at least 1 variable and the rest. And then you say, okay, let's print here the rest. And I'm going to write the other cases just to type a bit quicker. But here you can see, oops, sorry, this actually, what I'm doing here. Y said rest. I'm doing something weird here, maybe because of the other match that I made. Well, it doesn't matter. Let me continue with other cases here. But you can match about like more complex things. For instance, you can match in classes. Let's do an example here, like point, and then you do, okay. So imagine you have like a point class, and this has 2 integers. Then you can say something like, okay, so I'm going to have a point here, which is going to be 2 and 3. And this is my point. And then, sorry, what's going on? All right, let me do data classes, import data class, and then import from. So I say data class, and then class point, x int, y int. Cool. So now I have my point here. Okay, so now you can say, okay, so with this point, I will put there so it's clear. You can say, okay, match point, and then you can have a bunch of cases here. For instance, you can say, okay, for instance, we can match it again an empty point at the origin. So you can say, okay, so if the point has x and y 0, sorry, not cases, case. So you could say, okay, print origin. And maybe you can say, okay, maybe you have a point with x equal 2. So the y, imagine that is the one that you are searching for. So you say, okay, print treasure. And you can start adding more cases. In this case, it's going to print treasure because it's matching. So you can use, like, this is kind of a bit weird the first time you see it, because it looks like you are constructing a class here. It looks like you are constructing a point. What's happening here is that it's matching your point object, the one that we have here, against this structure. So it's saying, like, I'm matching this thing against a hypothetical point with x equal 2 and y equal 3, which happens to match here. But like the first time you see it is a bit odd, because you say, oh man, it looks like you're constructing a class over here. Like what's going on? You can have like you can have many like you can nest these patterns. So you can have, instead of having a point, you can have like a list of points. So you say x equals 0, y equals 0, and then point 1 and 2. And then you can do a match statement here, and then you can say, okay, I'm going to have a case when I have a list with a point at the origin, right? And then another point with x1 and x2 maybe, and I need to match with the name. So let's put x equal 2 and y equal 3. So this is going to match this particular one, and then you can print found. So this particular case, it will, what I'm doing wrong here, 2, 3, x is x equal 1 and y equals 2. So let me do it. X equal 1 and y equal 2. Right. So now I print found, I print found because it has 1. So you can match against like lists here and dictionaries and a bunch of other things. So you can literally pass almost any structure, and then you can, you know, unpack based on the different like particularities of what is inside, and you actually can match against many other things. So for instance, you can also say you have a like, you know, a point that you don't know what is inside. So let's put like 22 and 33, and then you can also have like a case based on the arbitrary values that you have. So you can say, you know, maybe x and y here. I don't know what those are. Let's call them something else, like x1, x2, and then you can just print these variables. So, you know, I just want to point any of the points that you have. Sorry, x and y there. X1, x and y. And then I bring here. Oh, and then I need to match on point. Sorry, point. And then I have x and y and print x and y. You can put any names there, so the names are not important. So you can name this thing x1 and y2. Match point case point x1 and y2, and then you can print the insides of these things. So you can say just print the variables, which is quite cool because they are passing one of these points. But let's say you don't care about the object, so you don't need to do like point.x, point.y, right? So this is like much more verbose, and it will create this tuple or whatever. Like in this case, this match unstructured thing, it will give you access to the individual points over here, which is quite cool. And this, you know, you can compose these things. So now, if you remember, we have these points. So we do a point at the origin, and then let's do another point, you know, maybe with x equal 1 and y equal 2. So you can compose. Now we have this points list. So I want to print here, and then you can say, okay, match on points, match on points. And then I want a list of point, in which case the first element is at the first position, is at the origin. And then I will have a point at some point that I don't know, like let's call x1, y2, or like, I don't know where this will be, but a list of 2 points. And I want just to print, you know, x1 and y1, right? And so this is smart enough to, you know, find that you have a list of, like, you can have many other cases, and then you can have like, you know, an unknown list of things. And this is smart enough to know, like, you know, the one that you want is this one, but you actually are only interested in these 2 variables, and it gives you super immediate access to it, right? That's one of the examples that you have. You can also do a bunch of other cases. For instance, you can say, I match on points, and maybe, you know, you want a list of 1 point, which is not what we have. So you do something here, but then you want to say the else, like what happens if there is no match? Like what happens if there is no match? So there is this specific like thing that you can write, this case underscore. This underscore here is special. It feels also a bit weird when you see it for the first time. It's like, why is this special? So this means like this is the else. This is like the arbitrary case, like when there is whatever, I don't care what it is. This is the else of the case statement. So you bring here like no other case match, and here is going to print that because no other case that I have written match. So this is kind of the last opportunity to do something, right? Like if you want to write it. So this is just one of the examples, but it can do much more. Like for instance, you can have like dictionary unpacking. You can match against literals. So you can say instead of point, you can say 44. There is some cases which are weird though. Let me show you something. So for instance, if you can have, this is one of the weird ones. So imagine you have a variable called foo, which is 42, and then you say, okay, so you say variable equal hello. So you may want to say, okay, so I want to match on variable, and then I'm going to write a case which is foo, and then I'm going to print we have a foo, and then maybe you print the value as foo, right? And then let's have here an F string. So in this case, this is one of the weird cases, because in this case you may be tempted to say, okay, case foo is going to load the variable of foo, which is 42, and this is the same thing as writing case 42, but it's not. If you actually print this thing, it will print we have foo hello, because what happens here is this is a match against anything, and you are using a variable to capture that value. So you are basically capturing the value of whatever you pass here, this anything, with the name foo. And then when you have here, so it doesn't matter what I pass. Like you can have like a tuple here. So you can have a tuple, you can match on the tuple and with the same case statement, case foo, and the foo will be the tuples because you are matching against anything. It's just that you call that anything foo. You can do something about these things. So for instance, if you have a class, let's say you have a class A, and then you have your foo. In this case, if you write something like let's do bar equal 41. So you do match bar, and then so you do things like a.foo. So case a.foo. In this case, never never like in this case. In this case, what's going to happen is that this is actually going to do the previous thing. This is going to load whatever a.foo is. It's going to see that it's 42, and let's print found it. In this case, not going to print anything because 41 is not 42. So in this case, it's going to work. And the reason is because this is not a variable name. This is an attribute. Like you cannot store directly on this. I mean, technically, you could imagine a version of pattern matching that does that, like that stores the value on a.foo. But in this case, we only have simple names for the targets. So in this case, this is not a simple name because this is an attribute of A. And this case is going to do whatever you think is going to do. So in this case, for instance, when if I do bar equal 42, and then you do the same thing. So match bar case a.foo, and then you print found it. This is going to print found because this is literally going to grab it from here. This is to show you that when you have like dots here, it's going to actually load the name. If you write just like this is a variable. Like this is matching against anything, and it's calling it a, and it's going to override the value of whatever you have before. So for instance, well, that's not specified technically, but it can do it. So for instance, you print found it a, oops, sorry, an F string here. So you say found it a, and you print it. It's going to bind it, and then when you do a, it's going to be 42 instead of your class. So it's literally like assigning to a variable there. But well, I mean, you can do many other things. So this is a super complex feature. I can keep going. Another thing that you have, for instance, is guards. So you can say, you can match against a variable, and then you can say case whatever if whatever is positive, and then you say print whatever, and then you say is positive, and you can have another branch that says case whatever if whatever is negative. And then you can have like the same thing, but you say negative here. So this is an example when you add this if after the fact. So it will find out, like, it will bind against anything here. This could be any pattern, so it doesn't need to be a variable name. It could be a list of points or whatever. But you can add these trailing here just to filter the ones that you care here. So you say, okay, so I bind against, so both are binding the same case, anything here, because I just use a name. But now you can add these trailing things here just to differentiate like some values. So that you can still do the same with points. Like you have a point, for instance, x equals 0, y equal 1. And then you say, okay, match against x. And then you say case point when x equals 0, but then there is something, is any y, if y is negative. And then you say, oops, sorry, what I did wrong. Case point, blah, 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 blah. What I'm doing wrong here. Y equal 1. I'm doing something weird here. Why is that invalid? Well, I don't know. We'll discover that thing later. But in theory, you can do this thing with any point. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. I don't have time to debug this thing live. Maybe we'll tell you afterwards. But you can add these kind of trailings to let me try without the x, because maybe what's happening is that I'm trying to filter here. So let me try x, y, and I say when x equals right. This is the other thing, and y equals 0. So you can do this thing, right? You cannot mix the assigning and the matching. So you need to do x equals 0 and y is less than 0, and then you say print. Yeah, I remember this. Okay, so origin at x equals 0 and negative y. And then the other case, let's say, is when y is well, the reverse, right? And then you say, okay, print out is 0 and positive y. Positive y. Okay, there you go. And now it's going to print positive y because if you remember my, well, I just assigned so you cannot see the point, but the point was when I constructed it. When I constructed the point, it was x equals 0, y equals 1. So you can do the same thing. You cannot match, like you cannot mix as you saw the semantics. We probably need to improve the error message because I just got confused there. But you see the importance of error messages right now. But yeah, so you can have this. The important thing is that you can have this like trailing part here, just to like see what's going on. Okay, so let's move on. We can go to pattern matching a bit later. One other thing that is quite cool is that if you do type annotations, so for instance, using MyPy, so before if you have like an OR, like a bunch of different types, and you have something that can be one of all of them. So you say, okay, so import typing, I have these variables, and you say, okay, this can be or from typing import union. So you can say, okay, I have a variable which is a union of like maybe integer and float and a string. Maybe you're doing some JSON or something, and this is like 3. So you can type annotate like this, but when you are kind of like doing this thing, it becomes very verbose very quickly. So we added in Python 3.10 like this shorthand syntax. So instead of union, now you can say this, so which is kind of the OR. So this can be an integer, a float, a string, and this basically will do the same. If you inspect this thing, this is its own object now. So let me capture the thing, new type. So you will see that this is like its own thing. It's like the union of int, float, and integer. If you check what this is, actually is a new thing. It's called types union, although it's built in. But it's quite cool because you can use one of these things now in each instance. So you can have a variable which is like maybe a 3.2, and then you can say each instance variable of new type. So is my variable either a float, an integer, or a string? And it's tell you true. And if you have like instead of this, you have I don't know, but it's not I have a bytes object. So you have a bytes object is going to tell you no, this is not a variable or either an integer, a float, or a string. Previously, you need to kind of pass a tuple to each instance, what you can do. But now you can do this in this way, which is quite cool. It's a shorthand syntax. It's not going to revolutionize the world, but it's going to be written like allow you to write type annotations better. Okay, let me show you more stuff. So another thing which is quite cool is this example. So let's do some experiment here. So let's create a file, right? And let's do the following. Let's have a class here. And this class is going to have like an instance called PyFest, right? And then we say is cool. And then let's do some very simple function. This is going to be like a stupid function, but just for show you the thing. So this function is going to receive one of these objects, 1A, and it's going to iterate like, I don't know, something ridiculous, like 10,000 times. And it's going to, I don't know, just save the variable name. So a.pyfest. Just save it. It's not going to do anything special, but it's just going to iterate a bunch of times. In a real use case, it will do a bunch of other things with the PyFest attributes. In this case, we're going to do nothing. So we are interested in seeing, okay, so how fast is to get like the attribute from the class, right? So we do, okay, so we do time it, and then we say, okay, time it, so we say, okay, so we have our object is going to be one of these, and then we're going to pass this to, we're going to measure this thing with our object, and we want this thing 124 times, right? Let's print this result. Let's see how much time this is, right? So if we execute this thing with Python, let's see, whoops, nice, for in range. So if we execute this thing, okay, so it takes like 0.29 seconds, which is, okay, so that's interesting. But look what happens if I just repeat this calculation a bunch of times. If you repeat this calculation a bunch of times, you're going to find that, oops, actually that's not correct. Why is not correct? I'm not using the correct number, or I'm not accessing the whole thing. Let me just copy the previous file that I have prepared for this thing, because I always mess up something. Yeah, thanks. So this is the same thing. All right, it's not a class attribute. It needs to be an instance attribute. Okay, fine. So you do the same thing instead with a class attribute. You will find that the second and the third time you execute this thing, it takes much lower. So calling this function when you perform the second and the third benchmark, it takes much lower times. And take into account that this is a super fast operation, just getting an attribute. So what's going on? This is something that we added, a performance improvement that we added in Python 3.10. This is basically caching load attribute access. So it's basically speeding up this operation. And what's going on here is that this optimization triggers when your function is called enough times, like a JIT compiler. The number of times is 1024, sorry. So when we do the first iteration here, what's happening is that it's doing it normally, but after this finishes, it knows that your function is hot, so it's an important function, and it starts adding the cache on top of it. And when you call it the next times, this attribute here doesn't go through all the CPython machinery, and it's much faster to load. This was an idea that was inspired by PyPy and MicroPython, and we did it like in collaboration with Yuri Selivanov and Inada San. But this is something that I actually did the commit, and it's quite cool because it's not going to be a game changer, but it's just one of the examples of how Python is much faster. Like if you do the same experiment with Python 3.9, you will see that the numbers are quite worse, like 0.37 seconds, while with Python 3.10, the whole operations is faster. Like just even getting the first time without optimizations is already faster, but now you see that it's going to be even faster if you call it like a huge amount of times. But we have like plenty of other optimizations which are quite cool. Like for instance, let me show you some. So we and the last thing already, because I've been talking for a lot of time. So we find also that when you compile Python with optimizations, it's a special flag that you can pass. It's called enable optimizations. If you are using certain compilers like GCC, we are now also injecting a bunch of special compilation flags that solves a bunch of inefficiencies on how CPython is compiled. Actually, let me show you which inefficiencies I'm talking about. So for instance, if you go to, I have this no optimized version so we can see what's going on. So if we attach a debugger to Python, and let's say we are going to stop in a function called gc collect main. Okay, so this is the garbage collector, and then we run. Okay, so we are here. So if you look at the assembly code of this function, there is a lot of assembly here, but you will see that, sometimes it's calling, let's pick one that is easy to see. For instance, there's a lot of stuff. There you go. So for instance, let's call this function. So this assembly, the garbage collector is called this PyDialog at PLT. So this is a function that CPython has. But let's see what this is doing. So this is a normal CPython, machine. So if you look at like, okay, so let's break here. Let's see what happens when we go there. So we are now in this PyDialog at PLT thing. If you look at the assembly of this function, you will see that it's quite short, like only 3 instructions. So this is actually not the real function, because this is an indirection that interpreter, the compiler does to allow like what is called ser-library interposition. What's going on really is that the actual function lives here. So for instance, if you look at this memory address and then you say, okay, this is like a void star pointer, and I'm interested in seeing what is inside. You will see that this is the actual real function. So the real function, this PyDialog, lives here in this address. So what's going to happen is that the interpreter calls this function, but then it has to call also another function by the reference in this pointer, and then that's the real one. Technically, it's a bit more complicated because the first time it goes into this code, this is actually not the real function. This is the linker that is going to resolve the function, which is like super ridiculous because you just want to call the actual PyDialog and not these 2 trampolines. So in an optimized version of the interpreter, we get rid of all of this when you do calls from inside the interpreter to itself. So what happened is that the interpreter, so for instance, I have here one of the optimized versions. So if you do the same experiment, you break on gc collect main, and then you run this thing, and then you look at the assembly code. I mean, if you are not used to looking at assembly, you can just trust whatever I'm saying. But as you can see here, there is not anymore this add PLT functions, right? So I'm scrolling a bunch of these places, but there is not anymore. And if you look at the place where the dialog should have been, which is this code over here, now there is not even a function call. It's just a bunch of assembly instructions. And the reason is because the interpreter doesn't need to do these jumps. And what's going on is that it's inlining the function here. Like it's just grabbing the source code, the assembly instructions, and it's just pasting it there. So this code is extremely more efficient. So if you use GCC to compile CPython, as many Docker does and a bunch of other places, you can do it, and you use enable optimization. Now Python can be up to 30% faster just by this example, just because it doesn't need to go through this whole indirection jumpy table thingy. Which is quite cool. It's just like a compile option makes the whole thing faster, which is very interesting. But this is just to show you a bunch of optimizations that we added to Python 3.10. In general, you can see how faster it is going to be once we release it. If you go to speed.python.org, there's where we kind of track the differences between every version of the interpreter. But in general, as you can see, like through different mechanisms, CPython little by little is getting a bit faster. Obviously, it's not going to be as fast as PyPy, for instance. So if you really are scared about performance, you should use probably PyPy or something else. But also stay tuned, because in Python 3.11 there is this group at Microsoft, like Guido, Mark, and Eric Snow. They're working on performance, and ideally, again, probably it's not going to reach something like PyPy, but ideally something much better than just a few percentage is going to happen. Unclear how much is going to be until we have Python 3.11. And there is still 1 year and a half to reach that point, but that will be a very exciting thing to see. But in Python 3.10, you still have like modest improvements. So, especially if you don't care a lot. So if performance is not super important, but by just using Python 3.10, your code will be a bit faster. So I don't have enough time to cover more things. There is a lot of things, and I would like to also cover other pattern matching edge cases. But I think I'm a bit out of time, so I think I will end here and maybe answer some questions if people have questions. Oh, I think right, you're muted, Miriam.
I muted myself so my dogs wouldn't accidentally bark and ruin everything. And now I forget every once in a while. Thank you so much. That was an awesome demo. We had quite a bit of activity in the Discord during your talk. So people were really enjoying the error handling, the matching, the annotation improvements. So looks like there's a lot of really cool things to come.
Right. Doing this in live is also very difficult because it's kind of a lot of things, and I need to like also handle the whole presentation. So apology for the tiny mistakes.
No, totally, for sure. That's not a big deal at all. I do auto caching is super cool too. I do a lot of Twitch stuff, Twitch streaming, and it's always a horrible mess, right? Whenever you try to live code, no matter what you're doing, it's a horrible mess. And we just love the fact that you're trying to show us something cool, right? Like there's always the pressure, and that was super awesome. I can't see any questions particularly in that Discord. So we will just thank you so much. That was awesome. We loved the optimizations and everything with there. And I believe Patrick's going to come join me, and we will go ahead and close out the conference.
Fantastic. Thank you a lot for the opportunity to give the talk.
Awesome. Have a good night.
Hello, thank you, Pablo, and thank you, Mariah, for hosting the conference. You've been really good. It was really enjoying seeing all the talks and the demo session at the end. Yeah, so we were supposed to do a game between us, but I think we didn't manage to organize that very, very well. So instead, what we're gonna do, we're gonna end up the conference a bit earlier today, but we're also gonna do a special announcement on PyCon 12. So as you know, we usually organize PyCon Italy every year in Florence, but yeah, we have to cancel basically because COVID and all the other things happened. But we should be back next year from the 2nd of June to the 5th of June. So if you're missing out if you're missing PyCon, PyCon Italy or Italy in general, you should basically join us next year. So there's going to be, the website is already live. All the information are there. So yeah, make sure that you go to PyCon directly so to see all the information. We're going to post the links on our Twitter and all the other social channels. And I'm also going to show a slide here before ending the stream. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.